So let's talk about everything you need to know about next generation gaming, because next generation gaming is going to be fairly expensive for what it is, and there is a lot of hidden fees behind the scenes when it comes to next generation gaming that you may obviously not even be aware of. Now, of course, when it comes to the Xbox Series line and when it comes to the PS5 line, of course, both Sony and Microsoft are both making two versions of their next generation consoles. Of course, with Microsoft, of course, with the next Xbox, we're going to have two versions. One's going to be the Series S, and of course, the Series S is going to be the alternative, cheaper version of the upcoming Xbox Series X, which is pretty much the full-fat version of next generation gaming, whereas the Series S is going to be slightly cheaper, and you will get sacrifices in performance when it comes to the actual gameplay and how the games actually run on that console. And then moving over, of course, to the PS5. The PS5 is a little bit different than the series consoles just because they are making two versions of the PS5, but they're both going to have the same power under the hood. So no matter which PS5 you buy, you are going to be able to play the games at the exact same performance across the board. The only difference is one console is going to have a disk drive and one console is not going to have a disk drive, so you can't actually play physical games and pop a Blu-ray disc inside of the system if you wanted to use that. That's the only difference. So it is kind of interesting that both Sony and Microsoft are both taking totally different approaches when it comes to their consoles and how they want to distribute their consoles to the consumer. But alongside that, there is going to be a lot of additional fees that you will have to pay when it comes to these consoles. Of course, right out the gate, you are of course going to have to buy things like games, most likely maybe a membership if you want to play on things like the PSN network to play online multiplayer games, or of course on Microsoft consoles you may want to pick up things like Xbox Live to play online, or even things like Games Pass from them, because Games Pass is amazing and that can get kind of expensive. And then you have to buy maybe extra controllers if you're going to play with other people and things like that. And controllers just seem like they are tending to go up over time. I think the PlayStation 5 controller, the DualSense controller, off the top of my head, I think easily goes for $70, I want to say, at least here in the US. And that can be very expensive, of course. So you can see everything eats up the price of the console. When you factor in the price of the console and when you factor in all these different things, it just gets very expensive. And something to take in consideration this generation that wasn't really too big of a deal last generation is the fact that now you will need to buy specific extra storage for these consoles, because right out the gate, let's face it, both Sony and Microsoft, when it comes to both of their consoles, aren't actually going to give you enough memory right out of the gate. And that's kind of ridiculous if you ask me, but I mean it makes sense, because if you look at the price of these brand new consoles coming out, I think these companies are actually going to take either a loss on these consoles when it comes to price, or they're going to make almost no money on this. I know that sounds kind of ridiculous, but the thing is here, you do have to realize is the fact that they are going to make up all this money when it comes to accessories and when it comes to games and when it comes to memberships. They're going to make all of it back, so it's not really a big deal. And as time goes on, of course, these things tend to get cheaper, and as these things tend to get cheaper, they'll potentially make more money in their pocket. But today we also have a brand new leak. Apparently, we also know what the external storage is going to cost on the PS5. If you look at this article right here and you scroll all the way down, it looks like there is going to be a PS5 500 gig SSD drive for $115, and that's pretty expensive for what it is, at least if you compare it to things like a standard hard drive counterpart external. Of course, those things aren't too expensive, and you can usually walk away with 2 or 3 terabyte in a really good deal if you actually wanted to do that. And it's also very interesting how both Microsoft and Sony are actually handling the storage situation when it comes to next generation. First and foremost, let's actually, I guess, talk about Microsoft, because Microsoft is doing it a pretty practical way. There is both ups and downs to both how Sony and Microsoft are actually handling their storage, extra storage situation. First off, Microsoft is actually going to have a primary SSD for their next generation console, so you will have to buy specific memory from them. On one hand, that's actually a pretty brilliant idea, just due to the fact that if you think about it, you won't have to worry about going out to the store and getting confused on what type of memory or what type of storage you need to buy for your next Xbox Series console. It'll just say works with the Xbox Series, and you just plug it in and you're good to go. But then on another hand, since it is a proprietary format, most likely throughout the generation of the console's lifespans, they are going to be relatively expensive for the most part, since they are proprietary and they are going to be custom. Most likely the price is going to stay high for a very long time. And then moving over to Sony with the PS5 line, it's going to be very interesting, because with the PS5 line, you can pretty much use any on the store shelf SSD that's an NVMe. I think that's going to be with the PS5. On one hand, that's great because you can buy pretty much any over-the-shelf SSD you want for the PS5, and it'll work on the PS5 as long as it's like an NVMe SSD drive for the PS5. It'll work. But on the other hand, the bad part about this is it may not be certified to take full advantage of your PS5. So essentially, someone may walk into a store or go online and buy a SSD for their PS5, but it may not even be certified for the PS5. So in theory, you won't get all the speeds of the PS5, and that's something that kind of worries me as well, because I can see people not understanding it and just getting any SSD that works with it, and it being a little bit too slow for the system. It'll still accept it, but you'll be getting like slow loading times in games and things like that, and that's not a good idea. But then on another hand, since it is using over-the-shelf NVMe SSDs for this thing, that does mean that you can use any over-the-shelf part, so it'll be pretty easy to find one. And on top of that, prices should be relatively cheaper than their Xbox counterpart, since they're not using a custom SSD for the system. So that's actually great news. But just the fact that these things are very expensive, if this rumor is true, $115 is $150 on top of the PS5 that you already have to buy. And then of course on Microsoft's end, of course, their custom SSDs are going to run you well over $200, and most people out there are going to need these storage solutions at the end of the day. There's no way you're going to go ahead and buy next generation console without having external storage. I mean, you're pretty much forced to buy one of these. I mean, granted, with next generation consoles, you can actually still use an external hard drive for like games that are going to be backwards compatible games on, especially like the Xbox Series consoles. But the thing is, to take advantage of the brand new games that are going to be made specific to the PS5 and the next Xbox Series consoles, you will need to buy a SSD, and most likely you'll need to buy one that's certified for these consoles and has the full fat speeds. And for that reason, it is going to get very expensive, and it's just too bad that these consoles come with mediocre storage out of the box. We're only talking 3, 4, 5 games, not even that for both of these consoles. So you can see it just gets fairly expensive. It's kind of unfortunate that you're pretty much forced to get one of these right out of the gate, because these games are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Of course, with things like 4K textures and all that jazz, it just seems like games are getting bigger. And then another thing I actually wanted to talk about in this video, I actually wanted to talk about what type of TV you need for next generation. When it comes to TVs, any TV will actually work as long as it has an HDMI port, of course. But of course, the thing is, with next generation hardware, you really want to get a TV that's going to take full advantage of these next generation consoles, since you're paying a lot for next generation consoles. And why wouldn't you want to get the most out of your new investment or your new game console by having the latest and greatest when it comes to TV? And that's where things get pretty tricky when it comes to next generation. Like for instance, what type of TV do you buy? What do you need to set it up and things like that? Let's actually talk about what you need for a TV. Now, when it comes to next generation, both the PS5 and the Xbox Series will actually support frame rates higher than 60 frames per second, and this is actually beautiful because this is the first generation, I do believe, in gaming history that actually allows you to play games in higher frame rates past 60 frames per second. Of course, on the PC side, everybody's been playing games over 60 frames per second for practically ever now at this point, so it's not a new thing, but for console gamers, it is a new thing. And the thing that's very interesting about this, of course, not every TV is going to be capable of 120 frames per second when it comes to the TV. And the thing that's actually very interesting about this whole situation is the fact that not every TV on the market actually supports 120, of course, but to make things worse, a lot of these websites, when you go to buy a TV from them, they don't specifically say what type of frame rate it is, and sometimes it's really hard to tell what type of TV you need for it. Like, for instance, you can see on the screen, I am on BestBuy.com, and you can see I'm on a TV that says Samsung 70-inch Class 6 Series LED 4K TV, and it's $699, and you're like, yeah, that's very expensive for this TV, so most likely this does support things like 120 hertz. But the thing is, though, you scroll all the way down to specifications, and there should be something called, let me see if they even posted here. They should actually post it here, I do believe, somewhere. It should say, yes, it says motion enhancement technology, motion rate 120. So you're sitting here with me highlighting this thing, and you're like, yeah, motion rate 120, so that's 120 frames per second, or 120 hertz on the TV, so you're good to go when it comes to next generation gaming. But the thing is, that's not really clear with this TV, is the fact that that's only a motion technology that actually smooths out certain things on the TV, and that's actually not the frame rate. If you click on this little eye right here, it'll say motion enhancement technology, proprietary technologies production in addition to the refresh rate that smooths out faster pictures. So it's pretty much just something that smooths out the picture, but it's not necessarily the frame rate as far as I'm concerned. So it's just very interesting that that's not actually the case. The only real way to know if your TV that you're gonna buy or you already have is to already like ask somebody or ask the actual manufacturer, of course. Or better yet, if you are looking for a brand new TV for next generation gaming, I highly recommend obviously buying the most expensive TV. I know that sounds crazy, but if you buy the most expensive TV, you already know that you're going to get the best of the best, and most likely you will be able to take advantage of next generation gaming. Now, the nice thing with next generation gaming, I'm not sure about the PS5 specifically, but I do know the Xbox Series X and S do have this, I believe, is the fact that when you plug in any external display to it, whether it's a monitor or whether it's a TV, it'll automatically tell you things that it can do and cannot do, so you cannot make a mistake. If you do buy an Xbox Series X or an Xbox Series X, it'll tell you what your TV is missing or what your TV already is capable of. So if you want to upgrade your TV or not upgrade your TV, it's up to you. So that's actually really great. But then another thing you do have to keep in mind with a lot of these TVs, even if you buy an expensive TV and you can already confirm that it does support 4K 120 hertz or 1080p 120 hertz, is the fact that you do need a specific cable for next gen gaming. You can't just plug in any old HDMI cable to your next PS5 or next Xbox and it'll just work out of the gate. Apparently that's not going to be the case with next generation gaming. Apparently you're going to need things like HDMI 2.1, so make sure your cable is certified for HDMI 2.1. Luckily, this is going to be the easiest part to determine, just because when you buy a brand new PS5 or buy a brand new Xbox next generation, they're going to give you the right HDMI cable right out of the gate, so you don't have to worry about, oh, is my HDMI cable 2.1 certified or not 2.1 certified, because it may be a little bit tricky to determine that right out of the gate. The best way to know if your TV is capable of what you want it to do is, on a lot of these TVs, I don't know about every single brand, is going to be the fact that if you look at this article right here from CNET, you can see they're talking about HDMI 2.1, which of course you need because you need all the speeds of 4K and the higher refresh rates of these TVs, so you're going to need a 2.1 cable. Apparently also a good way to know about HDMI 2.1 is, besides it saying 2.1 on the cable, another thing to take in consideration is the thickness of the cable. If the cable is a little bit thicker, it may be an HDMI 2.1 cable because it needs to be thicker so it can get the faster speeds from your TV and everything like that. But again, going down, if I go ahead and, let me see if I can open this bigger. Okay, I guess whatever, I can't necessarily open this bigger at the moment. But if you see this picture right here that's on screen right now, a lot of these TVs, especially LG TVs specifically, if you look on the HDMI port itself, they will mark the HDMI port for what it is capable of. And you can see on this picture right here, it says this HDMI port supports 4K, 30 frames per second, or 30 hertz, and then this one supports 4K, 60 hertz, and then they will have another one that says this TV supports 4K, 120 hertz, and most likely if the HDMI port on your TV is marked like this and it says 120 hertz, then you are good to go. If it's not marked, it could mean that the HDMI port is not capable of frame rates higher than 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second, which I actually think 60 frames per second nowadays is pretty standard, at least on 1080p TVs. I'm not too sure about 4K resolutions and things like that. So just make sure your TV's marked, or make sure you ask the manufacturer and everything like that. But at least when it comes to the TV specifically, it really looks like next generation is really going to be messy with all these brand new speeds that you have to take in consideration. Is your TV 120 hertz capable? And also, do you have the right HDMI cable? Which of course they're going to give you that in the box anyway, so it's not that big a deal. Overall, basically what this video is pretty much telling you is all the hidden fees of next generation gaming, because there is a lot of additional fees that you're going to have to take in consideration when it comes to next generation gaming, and more specifically when it comes to what TV you're going to need to take full advantage of next generation hardware. It does become a little bit more messy and a little bit more complicated in that aspect of it, so it's just very interesting. And I wanted to leave off this video by saying that I really do believe the future of gaming, like so many people are saying, is not still dedicated hardware like a dedicated gaming PC or a dedicated console. What really is the future of gaming is actually going to be things like streaming services, whether it's xCloud, whether it's Google Stadia and things like that. Just because when you look at next generation gaming, you notice one trend with next generation gaming. Next generation gaming is very expensive, and then on top of that, one thing that you're always going to have anxiety over when it comes to traditional gaming, especially more so on consoles than PC, is the fact that you're always going to have to worry about storage. There will never be enough storage, since games tend to become bigger and bigger and bigger, and these drives that actually hold your games become more expensive, and most time it's really not practical. That's why I can see a future where we only stream games, but right now is not the time for that, because there's still so many people that don't actually have the architecture at their house to actually be able to stream games properly. There's always things that you have to worry about. I mean, a lot of these companies aren't even ready for a future like that. They're going to have to build their structure on their end as well. Overall, it's going to be many, many years before we finally get to that streaming future where nobody has a streaming or a dedicated gaming console or a dedicated gaming PC at their house for the time being. But yes, next generation is on the horizon, and I hope you know what you're expecting when it comes to next generation gaming. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.